What do you mean they voluntarily ingest stimulants that could stop their cardiac functions? Senior researcher 6427 waved all four of their sensory appendages in distress, causing ripples across their crystalline form. The briefing room of the Galactic Academy's Xenobiology department was filled with similar sounds of disbelief from the other graduate students. Professor AN9, a veteran xenobiologist who had survived 3 expeditions to Earth, activated her bioluminescent patches in what her students recognized as a psi. Coffee, as they call it, is actually one of their milder substances. The humans have evolved to not only tolerate but depend on various compounds that would be lethal to most sentient species. The classroom of 20 graduate students, representing some of the most promising young minds from across the galaxy, collectively shifted in their environmental suits. They were the first batch of xenobiology students approved for an extended research visit to Earth, and the pre-expedition briefing was quickly eroding their confidence. But surely, began Quantum Matrix K-12, their quantum consciousness flickering anxiously within their containment sphere. Surely they must use advanced protective equipment for daily survival. Our preliminary scans indicate their planet has extreme temperature variations, toxic atmospheric compounds, and crushing gravitational forces. Professor AN9's color patterns shifted to what humans might interpret as a wry smile. They wear cloth. Sometimes, when they're feeling particularly cautious, they might add a layer of what they call sunscreen. The room erupted in chaos. Several gaseous students had to be reminded to maintain their corporeal forms. Silence. Professor AN9's bioluminescence flashed brightly. This is precisely why Earth has been classified as a Class 12 Deathworld. Not because of its environmental conditions alone, but because it has produced a species that considers such conditions normal. The humans don't just survive their planet, they thrive on it. 6427 raised an appendage tentatively. Professor, my research indicates they can't even regenerate lost limbs. How did such a physically limited species become the dominant life form on a death world? An excellent question. The professor activated the holographic display, showing various human activities. Humans compensate for their physical limitations with something far more dangerous: adaptability and innovation. When they couldn't survive in cold climates, they didn't wait for evolution. They invented artificial heating. When they couldn't fly, they built machines that could. When they found substances that could kill them, they studied them until they could use them as medicine. The images shifted to show humans participating in various sports activities. Several students emitted distress signals at the sight of humans deliberately throwing themselves off high platforms into water for recreation. But Professor, a collective consciousness student composed of thousands of microscopic organisms, asked, "Our mission parameters indicate we'll be observing them in their educational institutions. Surely that must be safe." Professor AN9's color patterns darkened. "Let me tell you about something humans call college football." As the professor described various human educational traditions, Zix427 began to regret their thesis choice. They had selected Earth because they thought studying primitive Deathworlders would be an easy path to academic recognition. Now they were wondering if they should have chosen something safer, like analyzing the plasma storms of the Crab Nebula. "Your environmental suits," the professor continued, "are rated for conditions 3 times more extreme than Earth's worst environments. They include emergency teleporters, medical stasis fields, and quantum encryption to prevent human technology from interfacing with your systems. You will not remove them under any circumstances." "What about eating?" asked the photosynthetic student. "Especially not for eating. Human food contains compounds that could rewrite your molecular structure. They consider a substance called capsaicin a flavor enhancer. It's literally a chemical defense mechanism that they enjoy consuming." The briefing continued for several more hours, each new piece of information about human behavior more terrifying than the last. By the end, even the artificial intelligence students had developed new anxiety subroutines. "Remember," Professor AN9 concluded, "we are not going to Earth as superior beings studying primitives. We are going as researchers trying to understand how a species can take everything we know about universal constants and treat them as mere suggestions. Humanity's greatest weapon isn't their technology or their resilience. It's their stubborn refusal to accept limitations. As the students filed out of the briefing room, ZIX 427 reviewed their research objectives. They had planned to study human educational methods, but now they were wondering if they would survive long enough to complete their thesis. Their crystalline structure vibrated with a mixture of fear and excitement. The next day, as their research vessel approached Earth's orbit, ZIX 427 watched the blue-green planet through the ship's quantum-shielded viewport. It looked deceptively peaceful for a world that had produced a species that treated deadly neurotoxins as breakfast condiments. "Beginning atmospheric entry," announced the ship's eye. "All students, please ensure your environmental suits are properly sealed. Remember, in case of exposure to unfiltered Earth conditions, immediately activate your emergency teleporter. Better to fail your thesis than become an evolutionary cautionary tale." ZIX 427 checked their suit seals one final time. In a few hours, they would be making first contact with actual humans in their natural habitat. They just hoped their thesis advisor would accept survival as a sufficient academic accomplishment. Little did they know, their definition of survival was about to be dramatically revised. The University of Michigan's campus sprawled before the alien research team like a maze of architectural defiance against natural law. ZIX 427's environmental suit sensors were working overtime, continuously cataloging the countless ways this place could kill them. The local star's radiation alone was enough to make their crystalline structure resonate with anxiety. "Welcome to our humble institution." The human guide, Dr. Sarah Chen, smiled at the group. She wore nothing but what she called a light jacket, despite the devastating cold of 15 degrees Celsius. "We're excited to have the first ever galactic exchange program here at Michigan." Professor AN9's bioluminescent patterns shifted in what the students recognized as her professional diplomacy mode. "We appreciate your hospitality, Dr. Chen. Though I must ask, are those students engaging in ritual combat?" She gestured toward a group of humans throwing a small spherical object while running at each other at high velocity. "Oh, that's just ultimate frisbee," Dr. Chen laughed. "A casual game. For fun." The collective consciousness student, now calling themselves Legion X for human convenience, rippled their 1,000 constituent organisms in distress. "Fun. They're deliberately colliding in Earth's crushing gravity. If you think that's interesting, wait until you see our hockey team," Dr. Chen said with a wink. "Now shall we head to the laboratory complex?" As they walked, or floated, or undulated, depending on the student's particular mode of locomotion, ZIX 427 couldn't help but notice how the humans around them seemed completely oblivious to their planet's hostile conditions. Students lay directly on the ground, absorbing deadly UV radiation while reading from primitive data tablets. Others were actually exerting themselves voluntarily, moving at high speeds around an oval track. "Professor," Quantum Matrix K-12 whispered through their private communication channel, "I believe I've observed something disturbing. The humans are consuming potentially lethal substances in that building." They were passing what Dr. Chen had called a campus coffee shop. Through the windows, they could see dozens of humans willingly ingesting steaming cups of the stimulant brew they'd been warned about. "Ah yes," Dr. Chen noticed their attention. "Would any of you like to try some coffee? We have an excellent biochemistry department that could help calibrate it for your specific physiologies." "That won't be necessary," Professor AN9 interjected quickly, her colors flashing in alarm. "We're here to observe, not participate in extreme survival activities." Dr. Chen shrugged, taking a sip from her own cup. "Suit yourselves, though you might want to recalibrate your danger assessments. That's just a vanilla latte." The tour continued into one of the research buildings, where the true terror of human education began to reveal itself. Students were casually handling substances that, according to ZIX 427 scanners, could rearrange molecular bonds. Others were operating machinery that manipulated fundamental forces of the universe, all while chatting about their weekend plans. "This is our undergraduate chemistry lab," Dr. Chen explained, leading them past a room where young humans were mixing compounds with shocking casualness. "Nothing too exciting today, just basic organic synthesis." "Nothing too exciting." Legion X's thousand voices harmonized in disbelief. "They're creating new molecular structures without quantum containment fields." "Oh, we saved those for the graduate labs," Dr. Chen said cheerfully. "Speaking of which, we're very interested in your crystalline structure." Zix 427. "Our materials science department has some theories about your quantum lattice configuration." Zix 427 vibrated nervously. "You can see my quantum lattice. Just the basic framework. We'd love to do a full spectral analysis if you're comfortable with that. Our new quantum microscope should be able to map your entire molecular structure." The aliens exchanged alarmed looks through their environmental suits. These humans weren't just surviving their death world. They were developing technologies that could peer into the quantum realm with devices they treated as casually as their coffee machines. The tour's next stop was the university's sports complex, a massive structure that Professor An9's briefing had specifically marked as a zone of voluntary human endangerment. As they approached, they could hear the rhythmic sounds of what their translators described as cheering. "Perfect timing," Dr. Chen exclaimed. "Looks like the gymnastics team is practicing. Would you like to watch?" Before anyone could object, she led them into the facility. The alien students watched in horror as humans launched themselves through the air, defying gravity in ways that seemed to ignore basic physics. Their bodies twisted and turned at angles that should have resulted in immediate structural failure. "Remarkable flexibility coefficient," Quantum Matrix K12 observed, their quantum consciousness flickering rapidly. "Are these enhanced humans?" "No, just regular student athletes," Dr. Chen replied. "Though I suppose most of them have been training since they were children. They start this behavioral modification in childhood." Legion X's organisms swirled in agitation. "Is that not against galactic rights conventions?" Dr. Chen's laughter echoed through the gymnasium. "Wait until you see the youth soccer leagues." As they exited the sports complex, Zix 427 was compiling their preliminary research notes. So far, they had documented 17 distinct instances of humans casually defying what their species had previously considered universal constants. Their thesis was rapidly evolving from understanding primitive Deathworld education to humans, a study in impossible adaptation. "Before we head to the physics department," Dr. Chen said, checking her data device, "would anyone like to join us for lunch? The cafeteria is serving something called Taco Tuesday." Professor An9's colors shifted to emergency warning patterns. "I believe we'll maintain our nutritional protocols. Thank you. Perhaps you could just describe your food preparation methods." "Of course. Well, first we take these peppers that evolved to cause pain." The collective groan from the alien students echoed across the campus, causing several human students to look up briefly from their coffee cups before returning to their casual manipulation of deadly chemicals and physics equations. Zix 427 made a note to update their thesis title again: "Humans, either evolution's greatest achievement or its worst mistake. A scientific analysis." It started as a subtle vibration, barely noticeable through the environmental suit's dampening fields. Zix 427 initially dismissed it as interference from their quantum stabilizers. Then the floor began to move. "Fascinating," Dr. Chen said, glancing at her data device. "Looks like we're having a magnitude 5.7 earthquake. Everyone, standard protocol, doorways or under tables, please." The alien students watched in horror as their planet's crust betrayed them. Professor An9's colors shifted rapidly through emergency patterns. "Activate emergency teleporters." "We must." "Wait," Dr. Chen held up a hand. "This is actually a perfect learning opportunity. Your suits can handle far worse than this. Watch how our students respond to a level 2 emergency. Around them, the humans were demonstrating either remarkable training or complete insanity. Rather than panicking at their planet actively trying to shake them apart, they moved with practiced efficiency. Older students were helping younger ones into safety positions, while others were already pulling out their data devices to record the event. Are they documenting the disaster? Legion X's 1,000 organisms clustered together nervously. Of course, Dr. Chen nodded, maintaining her position under a doorframe. Every data point helps improve our prediction models. Oh, look. The geology department must be ecstatic. Their seismographs are probably getting excellent readings. Through the windows, they could see human students outside actually setting up additional monitoring equipment. The ground was still shaking, and they were treating it as a research opportunity. Professor, quantum matrix K12's containment sphere pulsed anxiously. My probability calculations suggest this building should be experiencing structural failure. Ah, that's because you're using standard galactic architectural formulas, Dr. Chen explained, as if discussing the weather. Earth buildings, especially in seismic zones, are designed to flex and move. This university has survived far worse than a mid-5 quake. The tremors continued for what felt like an eternity to the alien students, but was actually just over 40 seconds. As the shaking subsided, the humans immediately began their post-earthquake procedures with disturbing casualness. All right, everyone. Standard checks. A human student leader's voice carried through the hallway. Text your families, mark yourself safe on social media, and don't forget to upload your shake footage to the geology department server. They have a social protocol for tectonic events. Zix 427's crystalline structure vibrated in disbelief. We have protocols for everything, Dr. Chen smiled. Now, who wants to see how our engineering department designs buildings to withstand these forces? The Structural Dynamics Lab has some excellent models. Before anyone could respond, the ground offered an encore performance with a significant aftershock. The alien students watched in amazement as the humans around them barely reacted, many not even looking up from their data devices. Just a 4.2, someone called out. Anyone want to start a pool on the next one? Are they wagering on planetary instability? Legion X's voices harmonized in confusion. Welcome to grad school, Dr. Chen laughed. You should see them during tornado season. Professor AN9's bioluminescence flickered rapidly. Tornadoes. Your atmosphere forms violent rotation columns, and you stay here. Oh yes, we have an excellent meteorology program. In fact, Dr. Chen's eyes lit up with academic enthusiasm. Would you like to see our weather radar system? We can track atmospheric conditions in real time. Some students even chase storms for research data. Chase storms. Quantum matrix K12's quantum consciousness briefly destabilized. You pursue your planet's atmospheric violence intentionally. With proper safety precautions, of course, Dr. Chen assured them. We have very strict protocols about maintaining minimum safe distances from tornadic activity. What do you consider a safe distance from atmospheric rotation? Professor AN9 asked, dreading the answer. For research purposes, about half a kilometer, depending on visibility conditions. The alien students' collective reaction nearly overloaded their suits' emotional response sensors. Meanwhile, human students were gathering in the hallway, comparing earthquake footage on their devices and discussing wave propagation patterns with enthusiastic gestures. Look at this P-wave arrival time, one student exclaimed. The new sensors caught the foreshocks perfectly. Anyone else's accelerometer app catched that vertical displacement spike. Hey, Professor Martinez is organizing a field trip to examine surface deformation. Sign-up sheet is online. Zix 427 began composing an urgent message to their thesis advisor. Humans don't just survive disasters, they study them. They build their centers of learning in areas of known planetary instability, then use the inevitable catastrophes as teaching opportunities. Request immediate revision of research parameters to include analysis of possible species-wide adaptation to chaos theory. Dr. Chen clapped her hands together. Well, since our original lab tour might need a structural inspection first, how about we visit the Emergency Management Center? You can see how we coordinate disaster response across multiple jurisdictions. We've even gamified some of our response protocols. The first responder simulation is quite popular among international students. As they follow their enthusiastic guide, Legion X transmitted a private message to their fellow students. Update to xenobiological classification needed. Humans are not merely Deathworld survivors. They are disaster enthusiasts. Through the windows, they could see teams of geology students heading out with measuring equipment, chattering excitedly about fault line activity and seismic wave propagation. In the distance, sirens tested the emergency broadcast system, a sound that made the alien students flinch, but didn't even interrupt the humans' animated discussions about subduction zones. Professor A9's colors shifted to a pattern indicating academic resignation. Add this to your field notes, she transmitted to her students. Humans have achieved something unprecedented in galactic history. They've weaponized scientific curiosity against planetary hostility. The university's emergency shelter was a study in organized chaos. Humans had transformed the gymnasium into what they called a temporary assistance center, with an efficiency that bordered on terrifying. Zix 427 watched in fascination as students and faculty coordinated relief efforts while simultaneously conducting at least 3 different research studies on emergency response dynamics. Anyone need power? A student walked by, carrying what appeared to be portable fusion cells. We've got charging stations set up by the bleachers. Wi-Fi's running on backup. Password is ShakeItOff 2025. They're making humor references about the disaster. Legion X observed, their 1,000 organisms clustering in confusion. Is this a stress response? Partially, Dr. Chen explained, helping distribute emergency supplies. Humor is one of our most effective coping mechanisms. Plus, it helps maintain morale during crisis situations. A group of engineering students had commandeered a corner of the gymnasium, setting up holographic displays showing real-time structural analysis of campus buildings. They were arguing enthusiastically about load-bearing calculations while simultaneously coordinating with maintenance crews. Look at these stress patterns, one student exclaimed. The new dampening system worked exactly as designed. We're totally publishing this data. Are they? Quantum Matrix K-12's containment sphere pulsed in disbelief, conducting peer review during an emergency. Multitasking is a valuable skill, Dr. Chen smiled, passing them on her way to coordinate with another group. Besides, when else are you going to get live data on seismic response patterns? The alien students gathered near what the humans had designated as a refreshment station, carefully avoiding the containers of stimulant brew that seemed to flow endlessly. Professor A9's colors had settled into a pattern indicating deep academic interest. Notice, she transmitted to her students, how they've transformed a crisis into a learning opportunity. 3 different departments are already preparing papers on various aspects of the event. A human student approached their group, wearing what appeared to be a makeshift badge identifying her as Emily, Emergency Response Team. Hey there, she greeted them cheerfully. Just checking if your environmental suits need any power adjustment. We've set up a quantum stabilization field in Section C for non-carbon-based life forms. Zix 427's crystalline structure vibrated in surprise. You have quantum stabilization technology in your emergency supplies. Well, yeah, Emily shrugged. We're a pretty diverse campus. Got to be prepared for everything. Last semester, we had a visiting silicon-based professor who needed specialized containment during a blizzard. Speaking of which, anyone here sensitive to temporal distortions? The physics department's backup generator is acting up again. Before they could process this casual reference to temporal manipulation, the ground rumbled with another aftershock. The alien students watched in amazement as the humans barely paused their activities. A few glanced at their devices, shouted out 4.0, and continued working. "I believe I'm beginning to understand something," Legion X transmitted to their fellow students. "The humans don't just survive here. They've made adaptation into an art form." Through the gymnasium's reinforced windows, they could see more human students arriving with supplies. Some were organizing food distribution, others were setting up communication arrays, and a particularly enthusiastic group from the computer science department was coding a real-time disaster response app. "Hey, alien friends," a human student called out, approaching with what appeared to be sensor equipment. "We're running a study on how different species respond to Earth's seismic activity. Would any of you be interested in participating? We'll credit you as co-authors." Professor AN9's colors shifted to what might have been amusement. They're recruiting research subjects during an emergency. Science doesn't stop for a little tectonic activity. The student grinned. "Besides, when else are we going to get data on extraterrestrial stress responses to Earth phenomena? This is like 3 dissertations worth of material." As the day progressed, the alien students found themselves inadvertently participating in what the humans called community resilience. They helped process data, offered their unique perspectives on emergency management, and watched in amazement as humans turned a natural disaster into an impromptu international science conference. "I have updated my thesis topic again," Zix 427 transmitted to their academic advisor back at the Galactic Academy. New title: Humans, a species that turns planetary hostility into academic opportunities. Request additional funding for extended research period. A group of psychology students had set up a counseling station, offering support to anyone affected by the earthquake. To the aliens' surprise, they were also taking detailed notes on varying species' psychological responses to Earth's geological activities. Preliminary data suggests non-terrestrial species exhibit heightened stress responses to seismic events. One psychology student muttered into a recorder, "Fascinating implications for evolutionary adaptation to planetary conditions." Note: consider cross-referencing with the Xenobiology Department's stress hormone studies. They're using their own crisis response as a research subject. Quantum Matrix K-12 observed, their quantum consciousness flickering with what might have been respect. Every disaster is a data point. Dr. Chen, who had been coordinating various research teams while simultaneously managing emergency resources, rejoined their group. "So, who's interested in seeing how we predict aftershock patterns? The Geology Department has set up some amazing real-time visualization models in the science building's backup facility." As they followed her through the organized chaos of human disaster response, Professor AN9 transmitted one final observation to her students. "Perhaps we've been asking the wrong question. It's not about how humans survive on a death world. It's about how they've made the very concept of survival obsolete. They don't just endure. They thrive on challenges that would break most species. Remember this moment, students. We're not observing victims of a hostile planet. We're watching masters of adaptation at work." The grand auditorium of the Galactic Academy was packed with beings from across the known universe. Zix 427 stood at the podium, their crystalline structure gleaming under the quantum-stabilized lights, preparing to present the findings from their Earth research mission. The thesis defense had become the most anticipated xenobiological event of the cycle. "Distinguished faculty, honored guests," Zix 427 began, their voice translation system calibrated for maximum clarity. "We went to Earth expecting to study primitive survivors on a death world. We returned with a fundamental need to rewrite our understanding of adaptation, resilience, and the very nature of intelligence." The holographic display activated, showing footage from their time on Earth. Images of humans casually drinking coffee while solving quantum equations floated above the audience, followed by videos of students conducting research during natural disasters. The traditional classification of Earth as a Class 12 death world is technically accurate but fundamentally misleading, Zix 427 continued. It suggests humans survive despite their environment. Our research indicates they have achieved something far more remarkable. They have made environmental hostility irrelevant through sheer force of intellectual curiosity. Quantum matrix K-12 floated forward, their containment sphere pulsing with academic excitement. Our probability matrices initially calculated a 73.4% chance of mission failure due to environmental hazards. Instead, we discovered that humans have transformed potentially lethal conditions into research opportunities. The display showed footage of the earthquake and its aftermath. Several members of the audience emitted distress signals as they watched humans casually conducting studies while their planet actively tried to shake them apart. Legion X's 1,000 organisms formed into a complex pattern representing academic enthusiasm. Observe their response to tectonic activity. Where other species would focus solely on survival, humans immediately began collecting data, forming hypotheses, and preparing research papers. 3 different doctoral theses were initiated during what they classified as a minor seismic event. Professor AN9's colors shifted to indicate pride in her students as they presented their findings. The display now showed humans participating in what they called extreme sports. Most remarkably, Zix 427 continued. Humans have developed an educational system that doesn't just acknowledge their planet's hostility, it actively incorporates it into the curriculum. They build universities in areas of known geological instability, then use the inevitable disasters as teaching opportunities. The audience rippled with a mixture of horror and fascination as they watched footage of human students surfing on atmospheric pressure differentials and skiing down frozen water formations. Their adaptation goes beyond mere survival, Quantum Matrix K-12 explained. They have developed a cultural imperative to understand everything that might kill them. When faced with a lethal substance, their first instinct is to study its molecular structure. When confronted with dangerous phenomena, they create mathematical models to predict its behavior. Most significantly, Legion X added, they have weaponized their scientific curiosity. Every potential threat becomes a research opportunity. Every survival challenge transforms into a chance for technological advancement. The display shifted to show human students in their caffeine-enhanced problem-solving sessions, which had initially terrified the alien researchers, but had proven to be a fascinating example of humans using potentially toxic substances as cognitive enhancers. We propose, Zix 427 announced, a new classification for Earth and its dominant species. Rather than a Class 12 Deathworld, we suggest categorizing it as the galaxy's first and only innovation incubator planet. The very conditions that should make it uninhabitable have instead driven the development of a species that refuses to acknowledge the concept of impossible. The presentation concluded with footage of human children in what they call the science fair, already displaying the species' characteristic combination of reckless curiosity and methodological rigor. In conclusion, Zix 427's crystalline structure pulsed with conviction. We recommend immediate revision of all xenobiological protocols regarding human interaction. They are not primitive Deathworld survivors to be studied with caution. They are adaptation specialists from whom we have much to learn. The auditorium erupted in academic debate. Questions flew from all corners. How had humans managed to turn their planetary handicaps into advantages? Could their methods be adapted for other species? Should the Galactic Academy consider establishing more research exchanges with Earth institutions? As the discussion intensified, Professor AN9 received a message from Dr. Chen. Heard about your student's presentation. We're planning an international conference on xenobiological adaptation studies next month. There might be some earthquakes, possible tornado activity, and we're in peak hurricane season. Interested? The professor's colors shifted through patterns of amusement and resignation as she composed her reply. Safety protocols will be observed. Of course. Dr. Chen's response came quickly. We've got quantum stabilizers, emergency teleporters, and a new coffee blend that won't dissolve non-carbon-based life forms. Probably. Professor AN9 shared the message with her students, who had just finished fielding questions from the faculty. Their various reactions, crystalline vibration, quantum fluctuation, and organismal swirling, all conveyed the same sentiment. They couldn't wait to go back. After all, ZX427 transmitted to their colleagues, where else in the galaxy can you get academic credit for surviving planetary-scale disaster events? The Galactic Academy would never look at Earth the same way again. The Deathworld label remained technically accurate, but it had gained a new subtitle: home to the species that turned survival into a science and curiosity into a superpower. And somewhere on Earth, a group of human students was probably already writing a paper about the psychological implications of alien species' reactions to their planet's peculiarities, with graphs and coffee.